Hi, I'm James McGuire, and today we're talking about current trends in cloud computing and specifically Oracle's role in the cloud market. To discuss that, I'm joined by Ross Brown, Vice President of Product Marketing for Oracle Cloud. Ross, congratulations, you have made it to Friday.
Thank you, and I'm dressed appropriately for Friday as well.
So some days call for that. It's just
Yeah,
the truth of the matter.
right.
I think it's pretty amazing about the cloud market. It continues to be a confusing place. There's a number of things, driving cloud adoption. Certainly, multi-cloud is very, very big.
Right.
Companies want to access compute tool sets from a number of cloud providers. What do you see as a couple of key trends that are driving cloud customers? I mean, what do your customers talk to you about these days?
Well, you said one of the key ones, which is multi-cloud, and
Yeah.
I'll point out a logic thing here, which is if you step back from the immediacy of kind of this right now, this sort of 3 year kind of horizon, and most IT horizons are like you could look forward kind of 3 years and you think about what happened in the past 3 years, and that's kind of that rolling window.
Hmm.
Step back and look at 50 years. The arc of
Mm,
trend inside the tech industry is towards connecting everything. And so
right.
the argument against multi-cloud is, well, you could do everything in one place. That goes back to you could do everything on a mainframe. You could do everything in this one computer. The best lie IT has ever told customers is if you only buy this one thing, it'll replace everything. Well, no. The
Right.
reality is the biggest entities inside this business from a services standpoint are called integrators because
Hmm.
the whole arc of technology is towards building new and integrating new. So that's one of the big trends is you get customers who go, "What do you think about multi-cloud? And should we go multi-cloud?" My first question is, "Well, what cloud are you on now?" And they go, "Azure or AWS or whoever." And I
Right.
say, "Well, okay. Are you also using any SaaS platforms like Salesforce?" And they go, "Yeah, of course we use Salesforce." And they go, "Great. So at the end of the quarter, your ERP environment that's running in your cloud provider, don't you write all those transactions of what you sold customers into the sales records in Salesforce?" Go, "Yeah,
Hmm.
okay. Congrats. You're multi-cloud. You're moving
Right.
data between major cloud platforms. You're paying egress costs to do so. You're managing the security between them. You're doing all
Hmm.
that stuff. Now the question is, do I need multiple public infrastructure providers?
Hmm.
We're all differentiating, and like we're all creating differentiated things.
Right.
We've got the ability to run high performance computing, bare metal capabilities, very fast performant networks. And so we're winning a lot of things like HPC workloads and design
Hmm.
simulations and things like that. Okay,
Hmm.
other people can do that, but us and another guy do it really well.
Hmm.
Containers, we're winning container workloads. Well, Google does that really well, and we do that really well.
Right.
So you're seeing
Sure.
specialization come around these things where,
They invented that, for goodness sakes.
yeah, right, they should do it
Yeah.
well. They've
Right,
got
right,
really talented people doing it, right? And
right.
so that's kind of the notion is, I liken every technology trend as a tree where it starts with a core branch of infrastructure. And as
Hmm.
we're now at the tips and building new leaves around AI services and IoT integration and things like that, how the ends of the trees look, the trunks are the same between all of us. We've got differences in engineering of how we do bare metal versus how other folks do VMs, but the real interest is what happens at the end of those branches when you get out to the leaves, the individual services that people build and customize that create value. That's where
Hmm.
you're going to see differentiation really core. Now, what's unique about us is we started from a different root stock than everyone else by building
Hmm.
bare metal. We're not
Right.
immediately dropping into a tree that existed and grafting new services on it the way the other guys did. We're building our own tree from scratch. And so
Interesting.
probably tortured that analogy to death there.
So some analogies should be tortured. I mean, I think it's interesting along the lines of the certain amount of confusion in the marketplace. I think you think that perhaps customers would have completely figured out cloud by now, but I think it's, if anything, there's more chaos, more confusion. If there's some challenges or some problems that customers tend to have in the cloud world, what is one you hear about a lot? What's a standard issue headache among the cloud customers you talk with?
And I'll use the metaphor of turning IT sideways is the thing they're struggling with. And so, if you think
Hmm.
about the way IT is organized and the way most traditional on-prem data centers are set up, is you have layers of expertise. You have a networking team, you have a storage team, you have a folks who worry about compute, you've
Hmm.
got your database team and your DBAs, you've got your security team and all this stuff. And they're just thinking about layers, right? You're now at this point of integrated systems. And so that shift to I'm writing an app and I'm going to deploy it into a container based environment on scaling VMs, the developers don't want to think about all that stuff. So now you've got to have DevOps services and people consuming and setting up environments that vertically integrate compute, storage, networking, security, database, and all those things into stacks that are easier for people to consume.
Hmm.
culturally, that's a hard change. Like if your organization and you've got, guys who are, I'm 20 years in being a system administrator for security, or I'm a DBA, and all of a sudden it becomes, I have many apps running across this, and it's not one
Right.
platform, but I'm having to think about data architectures for every app individually. That introduces a lot of complexity unless you can abstract that complexity with tooling and good cloud providers and things like that. So that's a big one, is that shift from layers to vertically integrated app environments and what.
Hmm.
Obviously, another big one that the
Right.
move to the cloud is a struggle for a lot of people is security.
Hmm. Right.
I'll say this, that there's two different design philosophies that are out there, and people are coming around to locking in on this latter one. But the original cloud was build then secure. So build your service, stand up in a minimum viable product, build it out, and now start thinking about how do I, of course you had firewalls and some intrusion prevention stuff on everything, but how do I really secure this thing down?
Mhm.
At Oracle, we made all our security tools free as part of the tenancy because it's just a feature of the tenancy as opposed to an upsell. But we
Hmm.
have things like max security zones, which is a way of setting up a tenancy where everything is off by default and you must explicitly open access to services. And so
Uh-huh.
you start from a notion of secure everything, then open, as opposed to build, then secure. That's a big shift going on that I think you're seeing other cloud providers kind of catch up to. The maybe security isn't a business we're in, maybe it's a feature of what we do and not
Uh-huh.
something we're trying to make optional, but it really should be built in.
Well, on that security piece, it's interesting. There's been seems like a big change in attitude. I think there was a time several years back, maybe go back to 2010-ish, 2012-ish, and people said, "Oh, the cloud. I don't know. We like it maybe, but it's really insecure. That we've got to keep things in house where it's safe." I think that it seems that there's a perception now like the cloud is actually safer than our in-house data center. Agree? Disagree with that one?
Completely agree, but I'll tell you why that change occurred, because it's not just technology, it's something occurred in the threat patterns that are out there.
Hmm.
If you look at sort of the shift that occurred, like the period between 2000 and 2010, that 10-year period was a massive shift in what happened in cybersecurity, from what I call vandalism attacks, the denial of service type things, which is the equivalent of a vandal going by and throwing a brick through the window of your store. It's visible
Right.
to everyone, it's damaged, but they didn't really steal anything, they just did some damage.
Right.
It shifted in 2010 to state actors as well as underground criminal actors doing more cat burglary. We know the
Hmm.
asset we're going after. We're going to fish that CFO with a specific targeted. We're going after that application to get that data, and we're going to try to do it undetected. So it's
Hmm.
not the brick through the window, it's sneak in through the air conditioner, rob the vault, and leave without a fingerprint.
Right.
That shift went from we have to think about defenses to we have to be really inspective and we have to look at what's happening. Well, if you have everything in a cloud environment, you can actually see that entire environment really easy and start correlating behaviors and events across it. So part of what drove that was, hey, are you guys really ready for the firewalls you need and the denial of service, and if everything's in one place? And kind of the fear people had was, like, if somebody gets mad at Netflix and does a denial of service on them, does it take down all of AWS? And I'm in a shared boat, right?
Right.
No, we know how to
Right. The
isolate.
answer is no. Right.
But that was a fear at the time, right? And now it's become I need experts who are looking at my tenancy, who know the behaviors and can see and correlate across tenancies what actors are doing. And so you can see a hack attack move across customers. You can see them going phishing and probing and stuff. So having that sort of eye in the sky looking at all the tenancies and correlating attack behaviors and seeing is more secure than any one customer looking at just their environment.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, let's drill down truly into Oracle Cloud. What's going on with Oracle Cloud?
Sure.
I know that Oracle Cloud. I read this factoid. I find it quite interesting that Oracle Cloud grew more than 100% in the May quarter. That itself is pretty jaw dropping. And of course, Oracle is shifting a growing portion of its database and application business to the cloud. I think it's probably a given that amount of growth. So we've talked about this a bit, but what do you see as a particular strength of the Oracle Cloud now, now that it's given that level of investment and growth?
So one thing I'll tell you, we're sort of teasing out stuff because we don't break out our revenue yet and stuff like that. And
Okay.
staff sort of teased out the 100% greater than 100% growth rate.
Right.
There are some interesting things about our cloud that I think would surprise people. Like, the percentage of our customers that are on our cloud because of our cloud capabilities and not because of Oracle apps and database is actually a very high percentage. It's almost half of our customers don't have an
Oh.
Oracle database running. And so there's
Okay.
this
Now
perception of,
that's a shocker. I guess I got to say that
well,
now that one really surprises me.
well, Zoom doesn't run an Oracle database, and they're running all their free and EDU tier on us, and that's a very large customer for us. And you got folks
Okay.
like Cisco Tetration and 8x8 and Phoenix, and these are cloud native companies that built cloud agnostic. They run in any cloud agnostic stacks, who chose us because better networking, better performance, bare metal, all the stuff we built as an engineer into it.
Hmm.
And we really did build a differentiated cloud for that. And so that's one thing I would tell you, is that we get quite a bit of that perception of it's a great place for the Oracle cloud, but not necessarily, well, no, actually that's the surprising thing for a lot of people. Um, so for us, as you know, we're in market and growing. Where I see a lot of the growth for us coming from, and why you're seeing such rapid growth, is we really have been able to crack a code on something. And James, I feel like I should explain something for the listeners. Um,
Please.
one of the things Oracle did different was we backed, we started off like everyone else and created a VM centric cloud with container services and stuff, what people think of as cloud native.
Hmm.
But we realized we weren't going to win. So
Hmm.
looking at the marketplace, you could see the hyperscalers like Azure and Google and AWS had reached this
Right.
inflection where they were not only able to afford to add and develop new services, but also compete at a price level because of scale that was very difficult to compete with.
Right.
And so 6 years ago, we hit a reset button and stopped our Gen 1 cloud, and we kept it going, but in essence, stopped really focusing engineering there, and really started thinking about what the strategy problem here was. And there's an interesting insight here, which is Google is built, the Google Cloud is built on top of the data centers that run search and YouTube and stuff, and AWS is built on top of the e-commerce engine that runs Amazon. And Azure is built on top of the global foundation service that runs Bing and Xbox Live and those things. Well,
Right.
that gave them massive scale. We didn't have one of those, right? We kind of did, but we didn't have the environment for it, which was our apps business, but that really wasn't set up to be scale yet.
Hmm.
We also realized the flaw in that while there was a downside strategically that we didn't have this scale environment, we also didn't build a cloud, or didn't have to build a cloud, that inherited the underlying design choices of that environment, right?
Right. You're
AWS,
starting from scratch in essence.
right? So we could build it the way we wanted. And so you start thinking, like, if I don't have to build a VM centric cloud, if I don't have to build something with shared networking and stuff, could I build something that's engineered to provision, automate, and deliver bare metal servers? Could I deliver all the way from bare metal to serverless compute? Could
Hmm.
I build networking where you actually isolate network traffic from each other, so that as a tenant, I don't see any other tenant's traffic and I don't have collisions from it? So instead of
Hmm.
isolating at layer 3, we isolate at layer 2 and prevent those traffic collisions. So what we did was step back and build a next generation cloud that didn't inherit any of the design choices of an underlying platform. It's designed to run every application as is. And
Hmm.
so one of the results for us is we can move, like Oracle EBS environments. We're trying to move to another cloud for an ERP environment. It's like a 9-month refactoring and rewriting of the environment. For
Hmm.
us, it's a 6-week migration, and a lot of the work has to do with mapping security and access and users, and making sure you get the model right, not the actual move. And
Hmm.
so that opens up a value, which is I don't have to spend, a huge chunk of my IT budget refactoring and modernizing applications to get the benefit of the cloud. I could move immediately to the cloud and then begin refactoring and modernizing, or build new machine learning services on top of it, or new capabilities. And so that difference for us of quick migration, immediate value, and then develop is different than the work, 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 and someday the cloud pays off.
Interesting. Okay. So, all right, let me ask this question then in terms of like Oracle in the popular mind, so to speak. And
Yeah.
that, when I think this change happened a few years back when people talk about the big cloud providers, they're sort of calling them, of course, the hyperscalers, and we knew who they are. You just the phrase hyperscalers, of course, means AWS, Google, Azure.
Right.
It was sort of the way the cool kids referred to those. So, are you saying that Oracle is just when we talk about the hyperscalers, it really means AWS, Azure, Google, and Oracle? Are you really trying to compete at that level?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, one of the things that we did, James, that's very different is, and I have to remind people of this. Oracle acquired Sun. We build our own equipment. We're not
Right.
dependent on other suppliers. As a result, we can engineer things into the hardware that, really it's limited for other cloud providers to do that. So building things like off-box virtualization for the network and cloud control computers to deliver bare metal, those are all things we're able to innovate on.
Mhm.
But we also innovated on how we build regions. And so this notion
Hmm.
of what is a region for a company, the notion of hyperscale is like millions of cores within a single location, often located next to a hydroelectric dam because of the amount of power and cooling they need and whatnot.
Hmm.
Oracle, we re-engineered how we build it. We build more efficiency into how we deploy and automate and the engineering of how we deliver a data center. And so as a result, we're at 30 data centers. And keep in mind, we've only really been doing this for about 2 years. We have 4 years of a lot of engineering work to start standing stuff up. We started scaling about 2.5 years ago.
Hmm.
We're at 30 data centers. We've announced 8 more locations that'll go live this year.
Oh,
There are more than 8 that will go live. We've just announced the locations of 8. I'll tell you the number is a double-digit number in terms of go live.
okay.
But because we built all this automation, we're the only cloud provider who can also build an entire region for a single customer in that customer's data center, a thing we call dedicated region, which is all of our services. It's not a deprecated tiny version. It's everything that's in a public region for a single customer at the same price as the public region.
Work with me a little bit on that one because I
Yeah,
understand, like, obviously the hyperscalers are constantly announcing, well, we're adding, cloud number, center number 41, and it's
yeah,
like in, northern France, and we hear that all the time. So you're throwing out the number 30 at the moment. There's double digit openings soon, but
yeah.
but work with me on like the entirety of the investment in one data center. Explain that, please.
So from a build standpoint, you're talking about the dedicated region stuff?
The dedicated region is
Yeah.
what I mean. Yeah, right.
So the way we design data centers, and we have a great blog post that I'll refer users to if they want to read it, called
Mhm.
"Shrink Wrapping the Data Center" or "Shrink Wrapping Web Scale,"
Okay.
and it's a little bit how do you build this notion of scaling automated, completely self-performing systems in a way that allows you to do it, building full redundancy and power, full redundancy and networking, full fault domains, and all that other stuff. We can do that in 2,200 square feet. And
Oh.
so that is way smaller than most cloud providers. Most cloud providers need starting at 100,000 square feet to open up a data center. And
Right.
so
But
for
I've
us,
had some apartments that were 2,200 square feet, if I remember.
yeah, so that's
Right.
small, right? But that
Hmm.
is what we need to stand up a full three fault domain, redundant power, redundant networking distribution. There's a whole architecture diagram on how we do that. The result of which is that's a service we can run inside a customer's data center, like Nomura Research or the country of Oman or Intel down in Chile and stuff. We've been running these things, not Intel, they're doing VMware, but we've been running these things where we stand it up. And the whole purpose behind it is if you think about migration, when you're moving an enterprise application, it's not one app. Like a
Right.
typical ERP has got 40 or 50 other applications that are integrated to it, and process control apps and things like that for running manufacturing floors. So you start by migrating the app. The problem that customers are realizing is I migrate part of the app. Now I've introduced a network latency issue between the cloud provider and my
Yes.
on-prem system.
Right.
Dedicated gives us the ability to put an entire region in a customer's data center, have them begin migrating into the Oracle Cloud there. It's a 3-year commitment for the dedicated region, and it's the exact same measure. We bill on consumption, it's the exact same price. And at the end of 3 years, they migrate everything to the public region, and we take it back, and they're done.
Okay.
And so
Yep.
you can use this as a way that says instead of thinking about getting to the cloud, how do we bring the full public cloud to your data center, allow you to migrate, eliminate the latency issues, and migrate at your pace and modernize at your pace, and then collapse the entire thing, and now you're out of the data center business. That's a unique
Interesting.
thing. By being able to engineer your own cloud, you can get to that.
Hmm. Okay. That is a selling point. All right, so let's look to the future. I think it's always about the future. People are thinking, what's coming? How can we prepare for it? I mean,
Right.
if you look at Oracle Cloud several years in the future, what do you see? And I've got to use the phrase artificial intelligence as sort of like a knee-jerk reaction. If I don't
Sure.
use AI, that I'm not doing my job. I hope you use the word AI somewhere in your answer. I think people are always listening for that.
I
Please.
certainly will. So let me pause for a second before I answer that. I'll tell you
Yes.
about the future, but one other thing I just want to note
Yes.
for folks.
Okay.
I want to talk about our brand for a second and our reputation.
Yeah.
Just address
Yeah.
some of the elephants in the room because Oracle,
Right.
we have a lot of customers who, have worked with us for 40 years and whatnot, but
Right. Sure.
we've also got a reputation around license audits and enforcement and things like that, where customers are
Right.
like, "Hey, I'm paying this massive support bill, and you guys, come audit me and all the other stuff." We just one thing I should make sure everyone knows: we launched a program, I think 2 weeks ago, called Oracle Support Rewards. It's a
Hmm.
unique program that basically says for every dollar in consumption on our cloud, we put 25 cents into a reward account that can pay your support bill. So if
Aha.
you, and it doesn't have to be Oracle workloads. You could move VMware, you could move web workloads, you could move modern apps or whatever. But in essence, we're telling customers, like, we don't want you paying your support bill and not getting value out of it. We want you moving to the cloud and getting value out of it. And so we've given them a way to get down to zero on their license support bill by moving to OCI. And so
Aha.
that's a huge shift for customers of like, Wait a minute, you're working with me on getting my bill down and getting me to a more valuable place as opposed to just auditing. And so that's kind of one of our steps towards the future is how do you shift the relationship with customers from kind of a license and IP related relationship to a
Mhm.
service and value related relationship. And that's a core thing we're driving to get there. Now, you brought up futures.
Sure.
We've tried in every service to think about how do we create, because this is the advantage of being a fast follower is we don't have to copy what people do, but we can look at what they did, learn from what they've done and build better.
Mhm. Mhm.
An example of this is like for virtual machines, like creating a VM in the cloud. Every other
Mhm.
cloud provider has this notion of shapes. You can create an 8 CPU, you could pick an 8 CPU shape, you could pick a 16 CPU shape. We're the first cloud provider to have across all of our platforms flex VMs. You can come in and say, I want a 13 core shape with 14 gigs of memory per core. Okay, that's now the James shape, and you can have that as a deployable shape in your tenancy.
Okay.
And so that notion, I'm only bringing it up as a notion of for every single service, we thought about how could you make it better than what's out there. We're doing the same thing with machine learning and cognitive services and data science. And you'll see coming from us over the next, I'll just put a pin on it and say 6 months, a
Wow.
launch of a significant amount of artificial intelligence services that can be built into your applications, uh, a bunch of machine learning capabilities around accelerating the development, and then
Okay.
a ton of work around how do you rationalize non-relational, relational document and object data into a universalizable an engine that can create machine learning value. And so, Oracle's a data company. It
Sure.
wouldn't be Oracle unless we came into this notion of AI services and machine learning with a unique point of view about how to scale and take advantage of it in ways that haven't been done before. I'm really
Hmm.
excited about it. So I won't pre-announce stuff, but you'll see over the next 6 months a ton of announcements coming from us.
And there is AI and ML stuff on the way.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
very
Interesting.
quick.
Russ, I think you said it. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise. I
Cool.
learned something. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Really enjoyed the time.